In this edition of the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, we have 10 unique deck lists, all of which have been statistically curated from a number of sources to ensure that you get the most competitive decks in Marvel Snap. These decks will help you rank up, get to level 70 to get that free variant, and overall just accomplish your goals. I'm also going to be including a new feature in this series where I'm going to be doing hidden gems. Decks that have very low play rates but very high win rates. And again, these are going to be statistically curated to give you the best decks that I can find. If you'd like to support this series, press the like button. It's tremendously helpful for, the content and for the channel, and it's absolutely free, and you have my gratitude. With that being said, let's get started with deck number 1. Now, Black Bolt's on the screen, and it's no miracle that Bolt, Stature, Miles Miracle, which is what I'm calling it anyway. It's the Jeff the Shark, Stature, Black Bolt, and Miles Morales deck. Now, this is kind of all over the place right now, and it is extremely capable. It's one of the highest win rate decks in Marvel Snap. Its cube rate is absolutely phenomenal. Essentially, what you're doing here is you've got that Nebula, which can just straight up tick away and create a ton of issues for your opponent, but mainly, it's the Zabu, which discounts so much, and you got tech cards like Enchantress, which eat apart those the Darkhawks and the Devil Dinosaurs. Most importantly, you got Jeff, which can pretty much go anywhere, and of course, you have on turn 5 Black Bolt. You move your Jeff, and that allows you to play Morales for 1, Stature for 1, and a discounted 4-drop. Even if you don't have Zabu, you can still play Shang-Chi, Rock Slide to pump up your Darkhawk or Darkhawk themselves, right? There's a lot of value here. If you don't have Jeff, Nightcrawler is a natural substitution. And if you don't have Nebula, I like Iceman or Sunspot. Iceman's a little better. But anyways, there's a lot of options with this particular list. The Stature Black Bolt package, if you don't have those two, you got to sub something out completely. Regardless, I really do like this deck. It's one of the best in the current meta. And let's talk about deck number 2. It should come to no surprise that Sera control is near the absolute top of the meta. Last week, we talked about the Sera Hitmonkey variant with Mysterio to allow you to have those huge burst plays with Bishop. Get rid of the Hitmonkey, add Zabu. You have the Nova Killmonger package, which eats apart all these nebulas you're seeing out there. It also gives you a bunch of added power because obviously Nova is one of the best 1-drops in the game, especially when it gets destroyed. It's probably the worst if it doesn't get destroyed, but anyways. You also have the Enchantress Lizard combination. Enchantress is an amazing tech card. You have the disruption of Rock Slide. You have the power of Darkhawk. You have the disruption and the anti-Galactus effect of Polaris. But most importantly, you just have answers. This deck kind of has answers for everything. You have Shang-Chi. You have Scarlet Witch if there's a location that's punishing you. You got Zabu. You have Enchantress. Like, it just kind of has every answer. And of course, like, Killmonger just wrecks anyone that's depending on any 1-drops. It's one of those decks that is sincerely reliable, and if you're looking to get to Infinite, it's one that you can lean on. Like the ebb and flow of waves at a beach, Deathwave finds itself re-emerging in the Marvel Snap meta on a regular basis. And what fascinated me about this list, first of all, this is like an archetype as old as time itself, right? Marvel Snap's Deathwave archetype is like one of the most classic. But what fascinated me was that this particular version of the list had a higher win rate than the version that had Arrow, which surprised me. That's why I wanted to feature it this week, because this version has a couple percentage point advantage over the Arrow version, which kind of surprises me because for the most part, Wave becomes a bit of a soft Sandman, so to speak, because your opponent is less likely to be able to take advantage of that wave on turn 6, because it's like, unless they played their own wave or they conserve 2 energy and they have their own She-Hulk, like their game plan is probably not, I'm just going to play, it could be just I'm going to play 1 card on turn 6 and whatever, but for you, you get She-Hulk, because you conserve 2 energy, She-Hulk becomes 2 power, and then of course the effect that all cards are 4, you get to play an additional card. So you can She-Hulk and Doctor Doom, She-Hulk and Death, because you've destroyed things, and actually Death should be free because you're destroying things as long as you destroy 4 things with Carnage, Bucky Barnes, Killmonger, Deathlock, and etc. You can actually Death for 0, She-Hulk, and play Doctor Doom. Now, it's funny because I know this technically has a higher win rate, but I really do like Arrow in this list. You could almost even take out someone like Deathlock or Enchantress to add Arrow in. I would always keep Shang-Chi in the list, honestly. But like, I personally still like Arrow in the list despite the lower win rate, but it's up to you. At the end of the day, this is currently one of the highest win rate editions of Deathwave, but your personal preferences might want you to get Arrow back in. I'm kind of worried about showing this list off. Not because I think it's going to like break the meta or anything, but I just think people are kind of sick of Shuri, right? Like, we're still not over the months of Shuri just kind of dominating the meta for so long. But like, I mean, Shuri, you're not really seeing it very often anymore, right? And it's honestly, Sauron Shuri is pretty damn good. Like, this has a very, very respectable win rate. You got amazing cards like Ebony Maw on Sauron is like insane. Imagine turn 6 Ebony Maw. That is a thing of beauty. I mean, it's basically what the Stature deck tries to do with Black Bolt, right? It's kind of what that power does, except you go the Sauron Ebony Maw route versus the Black Bolt Stature route. Ultimately, you're putting up a ton of power here. You have the Shuri, you have the She-Hulk, you have the Taskmaster, you have the Red Skull, you have all the traditional pieces. What's lacking in this particular list is the mobility of something like a Vision, which I think can go in. But like the thing about Vision is like you still kind of want Typhoid Mary because Typhoid Mary is an ongoing ability. Sauron strips that away. Lizard strips away gets its ability stripped away as well. Like everyone kind of benefits. The only one that really doesn't is Armor because it is used to protect the Shuri, but it's usually out on turn 2, right? So that's ideally what you want to do. You got the Tech of Enchantress, which I think is important because if you don't pull your Sauron and you have Typhoid Mare on the board, you can play the Enchantress on top. Regardless, it's a very capable deck with a good win rate, and if you're looking to play some Shuri because you bought Shuri in the past, this is one you can go to. There's a lot of people out there that either love or hate Patriot, and I totally understand. Patriot feels like one of those decks that, like currently with the popularity of Enchantress, should be easy to counter. However, its win rate would suggest otherwise because it has a phenomenal win rate and it's honestly not that popular in the meta. One thing I will warn you of, though, is that the play pattern of Patriot kind of gives it away near immediately, because when you play Misty Knight, like what else are you playing? Right? What are you playing if you're playing Misty Knight or Shocker, right? I wonder what's happening here, right? Of course. So in the current meta, this deck is actually performing really well. I really like the use of Debris to prevent any Galactus players from getting sneaky. So if they've played their Wolverine, play the Debris into the Wolverine location to block off the Galactus play elsewhere. And of course, that's just an immediate retreat for any Galactus player. They just can't do anything. I like the inclusion of Brood here. I like the inclusion of Brood specifically because of the Blue Marvel, which gives you a turn 6 opportunity to play Onslaught or Mystique on top of that Blue Marvel. You also have the Ultron finisher, of course, if someone is not prepared for it. But the major way you're playing this deck right now, because of the popularity of Enchantress, when you play Patriot, and unless you're playing Patriot Mystique on turn 6, which is also a common strategy, when you play Patriot, Mystique has to go in a separate lane. You got to split them up, because if you don't and you get Patriot Mystique wrecked at once, it's just bad news bears. So split them up. Prevent that Enchantress play, because the Enchantress play is relatively common right now. But ultimately, Patriot is pretty damn good. Of all the lists we're talking about today, Cerebro 2 is probably the most fascinating for a couple different reasons. First of all, you love Cerebro 2 because obviously the newly buffed Luke Cage, the natural synergy with Brood. But one thing I will say about it is that it has a good cube rate, but a lower win rate than you would expect from something I'm featuring on this video. Like some of the decks I'm talking about are like pushing the 60 percentile win rate, whereas this one's going to be in the mid 50s, right? It's decent, but there's a reason for that with Cerebro. The reason is because you have so many locations that can screw you up. Like Luke Cage will deal with the negative zones and stuff like that. That's totally fine. But like when you get Monster Island, like you just got to retreat. You just got to walk away. Like, yeah, they might shunk you, but then they got a monster on the other side for free anyway, right? So if you get location screwed, you got to cut your losses with Cerebro and you got to walk, because there's going to be situations where honestly Cerebro just feels impossible to play because this is what the deck is. Like if you can't maintain the power across the board, then you got to walk, right? So it'll have a decent cube rate and a somewhat lower win rate than the other decks here, but the newly buffed Luke Cage is fun, and if you're looking to try something a little different, this is one you can go to. But what I want to show you is one of the up-and-coming lists that has a very high win rate that's doing very well in terms of Galactus win rate. So, by the way, Galactus's win rate in total is actually pretty low. It's just a really popular meta list. So this is like less win rate oriented and more like popularity-wise. And the Galactus Destroyer, I think, is a fascinating take on this, where you're able to kind of have a couple different, play patterns here, which you can utilize Destroyer to an interesting effectiveness, especially if you have Null, of course, right? You play your cards down, you got that Electro, you Electro the Destroyer out, destroys everything, and you got, hey, I got extra mana, and I don't have to worry about an Electro. And of course, you have Galactus themselves. The Null Dr. Octopus effect is absolutely fantastic, and of course, Galactus Death. You got the Shang-Chi, you got the Spider-Man. I mean, this whole deck list is just pure toxicity. Like, this is probably one of the most toxic decks on the planet, but I liked the Destroyer splash in it, honestly. And if you have Nimrod, there's other versions, but the win rate with Nimrod is slightly lower than this, which is kind of fascinating. But regardless, it's an interesting deck. If you're looking to play Galactus, this is an interesting splash that we're seeing currently, a new kind of meta evolution of it. But also, if you hate Galactus, yeah, you don't have to play it, don't worry. And now we're talking about the hidden gems. We got 3 decks that I think are having amazing success on the ladder, statistically are doing absolutely fantastic. but they have like nearly no play rates, right? And we're talking about like, less than 1,000 games, more than 500. Like I'm not saying like it has 6 games and they won all 6 games. Like these decks are good. Like there's enough of a sample size, but they're flying under the radar. And we actually talked about this on the Snapchat podcast with Cozy. Cozy brought up this Thanos ongoing zoo list, and it truly is performing very well. This is a great list. I love the idea of playing ongoing cards with Thanos. You got the Spectrum, which is one of my favorite cards in the game. I wish it was ever so slightly better. But of course, with Thanos, you got the where is it? You got the Power Stone, which is ongoing. You have the Soul Stone, which is ongoing. So that's really awesome. It almost makes me want to play Valkyrie in it, but this version of the deck wins over the Valkyrie version. I like the idea of Captain America. It's one of the few decks you can play Captain America in because it just buffs up the stones out there because you're not destroying them. Khazar buffs up the Infinity Stones as well. Ant-Man has natural synergy with the Infinity Stones. Look at it. You got an Iron Man. Listen, there's so much to love here. You got the Galactus counter of Cosmo, the huge Devil Dino, which is always topped off because of the card generation of the Reality Stone, and not just Reality Stone. There's all the Infinity Stones, right? So this deck really does do work. I really do like it. I like the fact that you have a turn 6 option of Spectrum, Onslaught, or Thanos. Onslaught would be going on like the Iron Man, Blue Marvel, or the Khazar, of course, right? Mainly like Blue Marvel and Khazar. That's kind of because if your stones are wide, that adds a lot of value. Regardless, I do think this is a really fascinating deck. It's not seeing a lot of play, but it has a fantastic win rate. I can't believe I'm talking about a leader deck, but this is honestly performing really well, and it's an addition of Ramp that utilizes Jeff and Sandman, which is kind of a common variation. You've got the Jubilee, which is getting increasingly common in Ramp style lists, but honestly, it's the leader that's providing a lot of utility. When you get ahead of the board with that good old Dr. Doom, and you want to kind of take advantage of the fact that they have a Sandman, and you don't think you need to play Arrow, you could just play leader. You just play leader, and under most circumstances, you get that dub. Leader in Sandman based lists with Ramp is actually tremendously good. You can also get leader out early and then own the leader for extra toxicity if the Galactus deck wasn't toxic enough for you. But anyways, and I do like the addition of Magneto. Now, Magneto's fascinating because you're seeing a lot of Dracula from discard. We've been talking about Dracula for a couple weeks. You're seeing a lot of Miles Morales, Enchantress, Darkhawk, and like Magneto just says, hey, I'm screwing your board up. And that's kind of what makes this deck really good. This deck's win rate goes up with the play of Magneto. So Magneto is one of those cards that like legitimately activates this list in a surprising way, because when he drops, the deck wins. Regardless, I do think that leader Ramp is one of the hidden gems of the current meta, although we really don't want Sandman to get too popular, but it is performing very well. Deck number 10 is Bounce. Bounce is a hidden gem in the current meta. Its win rate is like in the mid to high 50 percentile range. Decent Q breaks. I think a lot of people don't really respect how much power this is going to output here. You've got the Hit Monkey. You've got the disruption of, honestly, Black Widow is so annoying in this list. Like, having Black Widow pump your hand multiple times with Widow's Bites feels so horrible. And then, of course, you have the Beast, which activates that specifically, but you have those turn 6 massive miracle plays without Sera. So like, I really like the idea of having a Hitmonkey list that does not rely on Sera at all. Just like the cost reduction of Beast, you're able to get out multiple demons while holding the hood in your hand and reducing that impact. If you Bast your hood, it's one of the best combinations in the game. And of course, Bast works well with Angela, Hitmonkey. Pretty much everyone here benefits. Even Mysterio, for those that don't know. If you Bast Mysterio, the illusions become 2/3s. Everything becomes a 2/3. It's like a mini Doctor Doom. Darkhawk, of course, benefits from Bast as well. And you're really only kind of using Korg here because you bounce Korg back to do the Rock Slide style double proc. So you get one rock, bounce back, another rock. But ultimately, it's just a good deck. It's a damn good deck. It does work. And it's a hidden gem. That's why we're talking about today. If you'd like to see more Marvel Snap content, we got a video for you down below, and I'd really appreciate if you hit the like button. As I said prior, it really makes a tremendous difference, and I appreciate everyone that does and everyone who watches and supports my content, guys. I love you, and I can't wait to see you on the next Marvel Snap video.